Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Also pleased to take a call at the dying stages of this very important bill. It's important, Mr. Speaker, because it addresses the three bills that we are discussing in the third reading. They discuss very important parts of very important matters that worry every member of this House and certainly worries society. So the changes being made to the Domestic Violence Act 1995 are timely, and they make important changes that will extend a greater level of protection to those who have got caught in family violence areas or in family violence generally. And we have heard probably about the last 7 or 8 years, Mr. Speaker, some quite serious concerns being raised throughout New Zealand about domestic violence. And the previous government and this one has continued that work. The previous government had the task force, and that task force on family violence is still continuing. And the work of government departments, ministries, Families Commission, etc., are important work. The courts have become much more involved in family violence, in dealing with the cases of family violence, and the changes being made here, Mr. Speaker, will make that much more, at least progress the problems that are there in the system. And so we support those, and this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, supports any action that will make the lives of our vulnerable, particularly our children and our women, safer. And this goes some way to do that. But the concern I have is that we haven't gone far enough or fast enough in this country, and I'll say that generally, to address family violence in a comprehensive way. This is a problem that requires comprehensive, long-term intervention. Some of that is addressed by legislation, and this is what this bill does, but there are other pieces of the jigsaw that still need to be addressed, because there is a bill on the order paper that also addresses other aspects of violence and the lives of children that hasn't come forward yet. Now, this particular bill has had a long period in this House. It was introduced quite early in 2009, and I would have thought that this was an urgent matter that we ought to have been discussing and passing much more urgently, and that hasn't happened either. So I have two points I wanted to make about the bill. We're supporting it, and they're making important changes that are required in domestic violence, but it is not comprehensive enough. Can't be seen as part of the comprehensive program. Neither can it be done fast enough. And the changes being made to the Care of Children Act are also important. It does make it. It does allow the courts to address situations that arise under the Care of Children Act that gives it a bit more power to make decisions and change decisions because the risk of a child is involved. And those changes to the Care of Children Act does that as well. I want to talk, and the third act, Mr. Speaker, is the Adoptions Act. Now here again is a very, very small change to the Adoption Act. And it's amazing, the act that we're working towards in New Zealand at the moment is the Adoption Act 1955. And that says something, that it is time to have a look at that act far more comprehensively, and rather than do what we're doing here, looking at one or two pieces of it, because it's a very old act. It's an act that's used quite regularly in New Zealand, and particularly when you consider the nature of I'm sorry? Well, I'm glad the member can count. I'm really, really pleased that the member can count. And that's a very important contribution, Mr. Bridges, that you make to this particular bill. But I worked with the Adoption Act when I was a child welfare officer in 1971. And even then we could see what the act was. And here we are in 2011. I was not to think for a moment when I was working with this Act in the field, that I would be talking about this thing so long after that period, almost 40 years after I first used it. So here we are, a very important area. The change we support, but really there is a problem. The government did have an opportunity to take this and change and bring the Act, modernise the Act, because the nature of adoption, as a lawyer, Mr. Bridges, you would know, the nature of adoption has changed so much that this Act really now is a dinosaur. And it is time to come back and change the Adoption Act. There's open adoption, there's adoption between single-sex parents, there is overseas adoptions, and even the attitude to adoption has changed dramatically from in the last 40 years or so. So here was another opportunity to look at something comprehensively. So Mr. Speaker, very happy to support the provisions in these three acts. This side of the House supports it because it does improve, it doesn't do any damage, it addresses some problems, but I think there is a problem that it does not address more fundamental questions in the area of adoptions, care of children and family violence that we could have taken this opportunity to address. So we were supporting this, and it's not as if we didn't have material, because the bill that's languishing in the order paper does take a number of these matters further as well. So with those words, Mr. Speaker, we're happy to support this, but just remembering to alert Mr. Bridges to the point that the 1955 Act, it's time to change it. You might use your considerable powers in your caucus. I wonder whether you might take, the member rather, might take this issue further, because there are people there who really want adoption to be modernised and the Act to be modernised, and I look forward to debating that at a later stage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker.